Hello and welcome to Frugal Noodle, the podcast dedicated to helping you understand your money, investing, finance, and retirement, early or otherwise. This is Cody, and on today's episode, we're going to cover enjoying the ride, because I think it's very important that everyone understands that looking from the outside in on this lifestyle, you might think that this is a miserable way to live and you get sucked up in the numbers and keeping track of money. And I want to reassure you that it's not all about that, and that it is a ride, just like the ride you're already on. It's just more goal oriented. As a disclaimer, I am not a financial advisor, and this should not be perceived as financial advice. This is just me educating as I learn. Now, when you're first getting involved in this lifestyle, this idea of retiring early and taking your finance seriously, you're most likely going to be in a position that's difficult, and that is the position of being in debt. And that is the most challenging portion of the journey, in my opinion. Now, I'm not that far in, but I would think that a lot of people that are even further in the journey or have completed it would agree that the hardest part is getting started and getting through the debt phase, especially if you're someone who has always taken debt lightly. And at one point, I would say I took it lightly, but I never took on any crazy debt. I never used debt in a way as purchasing larger luxury items or anything like that. But I think in today's day and age, we see so many things that have an option to do monthly payments to pay off whatever the product is, like a firm or whatever. I've seen it on several products and websites recently. So the hardest part is getting past that debt phase. And it's not like it necessarily is easy after that. It's still hard, especially building that initial savings, that initial emergency fund, and getting into investing and understanding how that all works. There's a lot of challenge and education that you need to take on and really invest, pun intended, your energy into to understand it. I would say that my wife and I have been only very seriously approaching this lifestyle for about a little over a year now, less than a year and a half. And maybe our position was better from where we started, and everyone's situation is different. I will always acknowledge that we are very fortunate. We are very lucky to have fallen into the mindset that we have as early as we have in our life. So don't take any one person's story of where they're at and where they came from as a comparison of where you should be. But within a year and a half of really taking this serious, we are already so much further along than we could have ever expected to be. So when it comes to appreciating where you are and where you're headed on this journey, it's necessary to make sure that you are enjoying the ride along the way. We live quite frugally, which means that while people our age and around us are spending money on nicer cars or something to symbolize their status, we're doing whatever we can to live below our means and use that money that's above that to invest and save and grow. Does that make us better than anyone? No, but it makes us more focused on a goal that's going to guarantee better control over our time and time spent better on this planet. Again, this is just my opinion, our opinion. So, if that's not how you see it, that's fine. You don't have to live that way. But while to somebody looking in from the outside, it might look like we do nothing with our money to enjoy it, but we in fact have different milestones that when we hit those, we will celebrate in some way. Now, when we got debt free, it wasn't anything crazy because we didn't want to immediately spend a large sum of money and make that situation not as good for ourselves. But it was spending a little more money than usual on a nicer dinner that we made at home, maybe a little fancier of a drink that night, but it was all at home. So it was still, pretty frugal. We have a goal set for when we hit the 5% milestone of our investment goal. We have a goal set for the 10%, 25%, 50%, 75%, and of course, 100%. And the reason it's set up that way for us is because the first 50% of your goal is the longer portion of it, because the idea is that the more you're contributing as your financial situation improves, hopefully, the faster your investments are growing on their own. And then your money that you're contributing is helping it grow more. So the time between 5% and 10% and 10% and 25%, it just gets faster and faster. And then when you get to 50% to 25%, it's nothing compared to the 25 to 50% time frame. Again, because your money as an investment is growing on its own from a larger sum to grow from, and you are still contributing to it. But my point is that to remain focused on the goal and on the lifestyle, the rewards that are set up for each milestone are based on the progress in this lifestyle. So at 5% of our investment goal, or 10%, 25%, it might mean like a slightly nicer vacation than we normally take, because we still take vacations. I have vacation time from work, and I'm going to use that. Mostly I use vacation time to do smaller getaways. Like with the pandemic lately, it's just been to have more time to work around the house or to work on our garden, our homestead that we're kind of building. But we have vacation time coming up, for instance, to go to the zoo. And we love camping. So as the weather improves, we'll be going on a camping trip this summer. We're not really big on like big city getaways or anything like that. So those tend to be expensive as it is. And with us not being very big on that anyways, then it's kind of beneficial for us to, know that we're going to have a vacation coming up that's not going to cost us that much. And we're happy with the end result anyways. But of course, we want to see certain parts of the world that will cost us more eventually. And when we hit those milestones in our investment goal, it's easier to say, this is our reward at that time. We want to visit like the countryside of some European countries and enjoy the food and wine and cheese that they offer, and enjoy the culture of those areas, and not just Europe, but that's just an example. So when we hit those goals of 5%, 10%, 25%, so on and so forth, those might be our rewards at those milestones. And everyone can handle this differently. You may choose with your partner or on your own to celebrate milestones in a more frivolous way or in a more frugal way than that. You may choose to just pat yourself on the back at those milestones. But what I think is important, and what people describe when they get further and further into this lifestyle, is a burnout, where all you're doing is thinking about getting to your 100% goal and afraid to do anything that deviates from it. And it ends up making the path a little more miserable when you get caught up in that mindset, which is exactly why you want to have rewards at those milestones, or whichever milestones you establish, so that you are enjoying your labor, so that you're enjoying the fruit of everything that you've put the effort into. For us, we're not even quite to 5% of where our goal is. Again, we're only in this by a year now, and the first few increments are the hardest. That's when you're pitching the money in. Your money's not growing that much on its own because there's not much for it to grow from. So that's why 5% is a milestone for us. 10% is also a milestone for us. 25% and on is when it really picks up pace. So doing every 5% milestone, eventually you're going to be celebrating like every month. And if that doesn't make sense, I did a little excerpt in my TikTok and I've described it before, but exponential growth is the reason why your milestones eventually come closer and closer together. But even between those milestones, you still want to make sure you're enjoying the ride. You don't want to get so caught up in the numbers and math of these things that you don't realize the time that's gone by. You don't recognize the things that you've missed out on because you were too caught up in this lifestyle. I don't think that it happens to everyone, but I do see how the potential for it to happen is there. My wife and I are very serious about this. And sometimes we overthink situations and the cost of them versus the payout of spending that money. And a lot of the time that's warranted. And a lot of the time that's exactly why we are where we are. But sometimes we just have to kick ourselves and say, just take the leap, spend the money. You're going to get the return on that investment that's going to improve the quality of your life or the life of, your car or your home or whatever it is. Like, try not to cut corners to save money. People in my TikTok videos have chimed in and, talked about living like you're broke and poor. And it's not about that. I've already established that before, so I'm not going to go into it. But there are times when a financial decision comes to us and we debate on it for too long when we know in the end it's something we need to take the leap on. Now, in last week's episode, I talked about how dealing with friends and family and those that are close to you and aware of your situation, and they might be willing to take advantage of that. Another thing in dealing with friends and family in this lifestyle is a lot of people are going to be surprised at your unwillingness to do certain things that cost money. And even if to them it seems like an insignificant amount, you're probably going to take a lot of those situations, look at them and say, yeah, but I don't need to go see this show, or I don't need to go do this thing. Like, I'm fine with us hanging out at a later date if you have to do that today with your other friends, and we'll catch up afterwards. And sometimes that offends those people we love. In some situations, I've heard of it actually ruining relationships. But as long as you feel you're doing what you need to do for yourself and you are enjoying the ride, then it shouldn't be a question of how other people feel about what you're doing for your money. Like in the scenario I just described, there's still plenty of opportunity for you to hang out with friends and do things with friends and even spend money on experiences with friends. It's ultimately up to you as to how much you want to invest financially into those relationships. And none of them necessarily need a financial investment. Now, outside of the percentage milestones, there's also the monetary number milestones like $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, etc. And you can choose to, each time you hit one of those numbers, do something more and more exciting. Start small, I recommend, because you don't want to lose sight of your goal. It's really easy for people to start off on this path, see that large sum of money in the beginning and say, wow, I've never actually had this much money. What can I do with it? And then you find something you can do with it and you start back at square one. So keep your expectations real and tamed. Don't lose sight of that next milestone where you can do maybe something a little more. You can also do a mix of the two, where at $1,000 saved, you can spend 5% on something. That's not much. That's $50, but that's easy enough to do something to celebrate with. That could be a day at the zoo, a day at the movies, or something simple. And then as you get to bigger numbers, you can still go off of 5%. And every time you hit a larger number, that 5% goes up more and more. And you can do something more extravagant by the time you're up to 100K and you're doing a $5,000 celebration. You don't have to do that, but that's just an idea. But seriously, like $5,000, I've never spent that much on a vacation or an experience in general. I don't even know what I would do. That would probably be that European trip I kind of suggested. And obviously right now we are trapped in the middle of a pandemic. So this is a great time to start saving and building up to those milestones. And you can do that 5% model I described and save those 5% increments of your investments and use those at a later date for something even bigger. Now, I've described it in a TikTok video, but a great way to make sure that when you are enjoying the ride, that you're investing a portion of your expense of whatever you're doing to enjoy the ride. Like, for instance, I really love to collect vinyls for my record player. And whenever I find a record I really want, I make it so that if I buy that record, I have to invest 5 times the price of that record. And in most cases, they're $20 to $30. So the investment ends up being $100 to $150. Sometimes it's a little less, sometimes it's a little more. It's just a really simple way of saying I'm going to enjoy the money I've saved, but I'm also going to continue to contribute to that money I saved through this enjoyment. But ultimately, it's really up to you and how you envision celebrating those different milestones. I do think it's important in the end to make sure that you are enjoying all the moments on the journey, though, because as I'm sure we are all aware, tomorrow is not promised. And if you're not enjoying today, then, well, just don't live that way. Thank you for listening to this episode of Frugal Noodle. Be sure to follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. That way you can keep up on the latest episodes. And follow Frugal Noodle on social media. There is a link tree in the show notes below. The music for this episode was produced by CARBS. And next week, we'll be starting the first part of our crypto series. We'll be getting into the basics of what crypto is, cryptocurrency. We'll talk about Bitcoin, talk about blockchain, and of course, more than that. It is a very confusing world, but once you begin to understand it, it's a little easier to approach. And of course, I'm going to lead this all into how you can invest in crypto and take advantage of the gains that everyone else is. Again, thank you for listening to this episode. This is Cody, and I will see you next time.